Hi, and welcome to a new chapter. In this chapter, we're going to talk about lights and cameras in Unity. So let's go ahead and launch Unity from our shortcut here. And it will come up, the splash screen comes up, and eventually Unity will come up. And when it does, if you've got a project that's still out there, still in the same place, that's what will open. And we're going to choose File, New Project. And it gives you this default location, which we usually never want. So click Browse. And I like to place things on the desktop. So click Desktop and a new folder. And I'm going to name this LightsCamera _ and then a name. Probably not my name, as you can see, but just a name. So we'll select Folder and Create. Unity will seem to close. Splash screen comes back. And eventually. Okay, we've got a new blank project. So there we go. So now we're going to create some objects to shine some lights on. So come up here to Game Object, Create Other. And I'm going to create a plane. Just a flat plane. And I'm going to give it a position of 0, 0, 0, so it's right at the origin. Then I'm going to scale it up. Scale it up in X and Z, so 20, 20. Leave Y as 1. Switch to a top view, and now zoom out so I can see it. And now I'm going to click on the camera. See, I've got, I'm going to move it down. And then I'm going to move the camera up. Can't really see the plane in the side view, but you can see it down in the little camera preview. And then I'm going to rotate the camera down. And now I'm going to go back to a perspective view so that we can see this a little better. Now we're going to go to Game Object, Create Other. Put a cube out there, and I'm going to position this in Y at 12.5 and give it a scale of 25, 25, and 25. So there it is. Now it's kind of bigger. We can see it. I'm going to go back to the side view and move this down, which is Alt Center Mouse, which is the scroll wheel drag. Then create Game Object, Point Light. I'm going to move it to a position where it's between the camera and the cube and a little above both of them. And then this little light icon here actually lets you see whether or not there's light being projected from the light sources onto the objects, and otherwise it's just a default light. So I'm going to make sure the little light button here is clicked, and with it not clicked we just get the ambient light. Turn on the camera, we see camera preview, it's all dark, and that's because the light doesn't shine far enough. So I'm going to click on the light, I'm going to zoom in, and this little circle here that's around the light is actually the distance that the light shines. And I can grab any one of these little squares here and I can drag them in or out, which will change the distance that the light actually shines. So now the circle extends out past the cube. So I'm going to click on the camera, and then in the preview you can see we've got some light on the scene. So that's great. It's just basic light. We can come in here, we can adjust it. You see, we can move it in so it's just partially on, and then it's much dimmer here. Click it again, and let's move it back out so it covers just barely the entire cube. Okay, well that's fine. That's a basic thing. But over here in the inspector, we've got some parameters. Let's look at the game, and that gives you a better view through the game window. And now the light's still selected, so we can come over here and choose any of these parameters and we can see things moving in real time. We'll choose the intensity. We'll change the color, give it a little red tint or make it darker. Change it to blue. And again, darker blue, lighter blue, all the way back to white, and all that. So that's fine. We'll click on camera again. We'll see, there we go. We've got our preview. We'll zoom out, and so great. So that's the point light. And this project is called LightsCamera. So let's talk a bit about the camera. Okay, I mentioned this earlier, but coming out of the camera here, we've got this triangle, and the lines coming right out of the camera are probably easy to understand. They're the sort of the top and bottom of what the camera can see from this side view, so you can see what's in the frame from the camera and what's not. But then we've got this line out here at the back, sort of forming a triangle. And that line might not be quite so intuitive to understand what it's up to. So we can come over here and we see we have clipping planes. We have a far clipping plane set at 1,000. And if I set this at 100, you can see that all of a sudden now the camera doesn't extend as far as the cube. Now we can drag here, click on far and drag, and we see the cube slowly showing up. And if we look in our triangle here, we see it's now part of the cube is showing. Now all of the cube is inside the triangle. So that's great. May not seem like that big a deal, but sometimes you don't want the things in the background to be viewed. And so you can set that. Now, while that's interesting and worthwhile, actually the near clipping plane is something that's more often used, because that will actually get rid of things that are very, very close to the camera. And you might right now think, well, what in the world could I use that for? Well, in a few chapters, we're going to be talking about first and third person cameras. When you have a third person camera, that's a camera tracking behind a character. And if the character is up against a wall and turns around, if the camera is too far behind the character, it can actually go through the wall and be inside the building. So that gets confusing, and you don't want those close-up things to be visible in the camera. So the near clipping plane is a good way to prevent that from happening, or at least reduce the possibility of it happening. So here it is, the near clipping plane set by default at 0.3. And I'm going to come in and just scroll, and look, you can see the near clipping plane, instead of being right up against the camera, it's another line. And now we're getting down to where, look at that, the cube is just partially visible, coming back. Just zip it in and out. You can you can come in and change the numbers, of course, but that's it. Near clipping plane. It's actually pretty worthwhile. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention about the clipping planes. Well, it's actually not exactly about the clipping planes, but if you look right now, the near clipping plane is actually a little farther away than the front edge of the cube. And if you look down in the camera preview window in the lower right of the scene view, you can see that you don't really see a cube. You see a little bit of the cube at the top, and then a little bit of the cube at the front. But where that front edge is gone, you see right through to the background. Now you would expect to see the back of the cube, like somebody cut the front corner off of it, and you'd be looking inside the cube. Well, you don't. And that's because by default, the only side of an object that's rendered is the one that's most likely to be towards the camera. So that on a cube, that's the outside of the cube. Now there's there's ways to change that. There's ways to see both sides of objects, but by default, to save some processing cycles, the system doesn't render those sides of objects like the inside, which it expects are never going to be seen. So just something to put in the back of your mind, and we may come back to that in a few chapters. Okay, and so we'll set this back so it's back towards the camera. That's because we want to talk about one more thing, and that's called field of view right here. And as I move this slider, you see the numbers change, but also those lines coming out of the camera change. And this is like a zoom lens kind of thing. If the field of view is narrow, then that's like a high number zoom lens. If the lines coming out are wider, then that's like a wide angle lens. Well, it's a wide angle, so wide angle lens makes kind of sense. And you can change this by dragging on this slider or just changing the numbers here. And we'll change it back to 60, and there we go. Okay, so that's some basics about the point light and about the camera. We've got a couple other types of lights to talk about. We're going to save that to the next video, and we're done for now.